Welcome to the Mental Health Merienda, your snack size guide to mental health wellness. I'm Dr. Adeline Leon, licensed clinical psychologist specializing in neuropsychology.
And I'm Michelle Young, licensed clinical social worker. So, for today's episode, since the holidays are upon us, we wanted to provide a brief video on navigating family dynamics during the holidays. But first, a quick recap on our channel. So, Adeline and I are two licensed mental health professionals and also best friends. We wanted to provide a channel where we can talk about mental health to help break down the stigma surrounding it, and also have a community where we can explore topics from a professional and a diverse lens.
To start off, as a disclaimer, this is not intended to be a substitute or replacement for individual therapy, diagnosis, or treatment from a mental health or medical professional. The information we're presenting is general and for educational purposes only. Please consult with a licensed professional if you are struggling with your mental health and well-being. And if you are in crisis, please call 911, 988, or your local crisis hotline.
So, the holidays are a time for many of us to celebrate and gather with our family. However, family gatherings can involve a mix of diverse opinions that can often be stressful and sometimes challenging to navigate. Especially for anyone who's already struggling with their mental health, family members can sometimes make comments that could be triggering or sometimes offensive.
In fact, according to NAMI, that's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, about 64% of people with mental illness reported that the holidays make their conditions worse. And another 2021 survey, this was by the telehealth provider Sesame, they found that 3 in 5 Americans feel their mental health is negatively impacted by the holidays, with 60% reporting an increase in anxiety and 52% feeling an increase in depression compared to the 2020 holiday season. And so with that study, we're seeing that quite a few people are impacted by the holidays. We usually think of it as a really happy time, but there's also a lot of stress that comes along with it, and it could definitely worsen mental health symptoms. And it seems to be, at least in this study, a pattern from 2020 to 2021 where we saw an increase there.
Right.
I do think that the pandemic likely played a big role in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think too, that thought that the holidays are supposed to be happy. Most people are happy during the holidays, and it's not everyone. There's a significant amount of people who the holidays aren't a happy time, or it could be triggering their mental health. So we wanted to talk about some tips to help manage these stressful family dynamics during holiday gatherings. So the first tip that we have, and this one's actually, I think, one of the most important ones that we have here.
I would say maybe the most important, actually.
So the first tip is to be okay with setting boundaries for yourself. So setting boundaries in general is one of the best things you can do for your mental health and to take care of yourself. So when it comes to invitations, so only saying yes to family invitations that you want to actually participate in. Don't feel bad about saying no for certain invitations that you know you're not going to have a good time. Don't feel obligated to say yes to everything. That's also setting you up for just having an exhausting and a bad time, if that's the case. And try not to put yourself in situations that you know is going to be detrimental to your mental health or to your self-esteem. And then when it comes to hosting, if you are asked to host an event, only host events that you want to host. Again, don't feel obligated to always say yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's easier said than done, but of course, I think it's very, very important to keep those in mind as much as you can.
And setting boundaries is easier. Again, saying it is easier said than done, but again, the effects of actually doing it is so important and actually does make a huge difference in terms of how we take care of ourselves. Yeah. So when it comes going back to hosting, so if you do decide that you're going to host a family gathering or an event, keep in mind that nothing is going to be perfect. So that's another a really important thing to remember. You know, no family gathering, no event, no person is perfect. Perfection in general is just not attainable, and it sets up unrealistic expectations that we're putting on ourselves and on other people. So a family gathering may have, little stressful events here and there. Some things may not go as planned, but they can still be enjoyable, even though there's little hiccups that happen. So try to be flexible and also embrace imperfection when it comes.
Michelle, I think it's so helpful to keep that in mind, especially as a hosting responsibilities. we see them shift down the generations. And
Exactly.
so, especially when, I think you and I are at an age where our generation is transitioning into more of those hosting responsibilities. And it's so hard to not compare yourself to the previous generation after,
Exactly.
maybe they had been hosting for 20, 25 years and it's your first year and you have this idea of this perfect
Perfect.
gathering, and you think that you should also live up to that when it might be your first year hosting, and who knows how long
Who knows
it
what's going
took
to
your.
happen?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, of course. We don't know how long it took that other generation to get to that point where things were running so smoothly. But really, I think having that self grace, and not having that idea of it having to be perfect.
Yeah, no, it's really important. Another tip that we have is to really be self aware. And again, I think that's also just very important in general. So when it comes to these family gatherings, people coming in, if you're hosting people coming into your home, pay attention to how family and even in law dynamics impact your mood and your behavior. If you know that certain family members, certain in laws, tend to make comments that you don't like, or that they say comments that bother you, or you don't agree with their opinions that they share, then maybe it's best to try to limit some of those one-on-one interactions with them if possible. And if you do end up in a heated conversation, then know that it's okay to walk away. It's also okay to change the subject. As we said earlier, setting boundaries is really important, and those are the ways that you can set boundaries with certain people that often make comments that you don't like or share opinions that you don't like.
Yeah. I think part of being self aware is also to be aware of your contribution to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a concept, this is evidence based. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which is known as CBT. And it says that our thoughts and feelings influence each other, which then impacts our behavior. So that's where the CBT comes from. So if you're having negative thoughts about this family gathering, and you're already going into it thinking, oh, it's going to be a disaster. So and so will say things that will really bother me. Then you have those thoughts. Those thoughts then lead to negative feelings about the gathering. And then those negative feelings, they come out in your behavior, and sometimes in ways that you may not be aware of.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so people play off of that. And so people notice that, whether or not you even notice it yourself, and then they might act negatively toward you.
Yeah, so
So
it's like a
it can be a
cycle.
exactly, kind of self-perpetuating.
Exactly. And I also think, too, along with that, thinking about how you contribute to a certain situation, is that sometimes you have to just also consider not taking things personally. So the holidays in general, as we said earlier, can stir up a lot of feelings for people. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know what everyone's going through. So if someone is acting out of character, or someone is being a little bit distant, or someone's just being a little off, or maybe you're feeling a little bit off, it's, I think, always important to also think about being compassionate towards other people, try to be supportive, because we never know what people are going through. And then also, at the end of the day, some of these things, they're not about us. It's not personal. So again, not taking things personally is, I think, another important tip.
Yeah, for all you know, it might be a family member, not as close, who you haven't seen since last, if it's Thanksgiving, that you haven't seen since last Thanksgiving, and maybe they've
Mm-hmm.
had some really rough times in the last year that you're not aware of. And so really giving them that benefit of the doubt and that compassion, I think really helps. But
Definitely.
yeah, but let's say that you do anticipate potentially
Mm-hmm.
going into a situation during a family gathering where there might be some tension. An important thing is to try to plan your responses beforehand.
Yeah.
And
So have a
so,
game plan.
pretty much, yeah. So have a game plan. And so this would be a way to try to avoid escalating conflicts. And so one way you can do that, you first start off by just asking nicely. So if you think about most criticism that comes, especially from family members and loved ones, it tends to come from a place of care. So
Mm-hmm.
you can help family members improve their communication skills by being open about how criticism affects you. So the idea is that if you're open with them, then hopefully they can be more open and more responsive to you.
Yeah. So, for example, if you have like a grandparent who's always asking you, like, why are you still single? How come you're
Mm,
not dating? Or those kinds of questions, which could be triggering.
mm,
You can say something like, Grandma, I know you care about my well-being. I know you care about me and you're coming from a good place, but when you ask me those things, it doesn't make me feel good. So can we try not to talk about this during the holidays? I want to just talk about, holiday stuff or some fun stuff. Let's not bring up my dating life during dinner.
hmm But if you notice that there's a pattern of negative conversation that continues to come up even after you've asked nicely, like the example, Michelle, that you provided, you can then remind the person again nicely. You could even make it kind of lighthearted, make a little joke of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, just let them know again about your request. So remember, you're asking your family member to alter their behavior toward you, to alter the way that they interact with you, and to change dynamics that have likely been in place for a very, very long time. So be patient with them. And again, try to be compassionate.
Changing one's behavior is not like an easy thing. It doesn't happen within seconds when you ask someone, right? It could take some time.
Yeah.
And again, this all goes with planning ahead and thinking it through. But in these situations, if you're still struggling with someone who's just constantly continuing to engage in that behavior or to make comments, they're not listening to your attempts to try to redirect the conversation, then it's something to consider is also removing yourself from the conversation, removing yourself from the room temporarily to allow the situation to relax. You might say something like, I've tried to let you know about my wishes to stop asking me about my single life or about my dating life. But you keep bringing it up. So I'm going to just remove myself for a little bit, or I'm going to walk away for a little bit. Again, you're just being firm. And I know it can be kind of awkward or or maybe it seems like a little like forceful, but again, you're setting boundaries and there's different ways you can say that. You don't have to say it how I was trying to say earlier, but it's about setting boundaries and letting people know what's going on. I think too, you're letting people know how you're feeling and how it's making you feel. And you're showing them like, okay, I was serious. I'm not joking around. What you're saying is bothering me. So removing yourself also shows them it's a consequence that you're showing them that I'm not going to continue to engage in this behavior. And it is upsetting you.
Yeah, and I know it could seem very difficult to be so direct, like what we're suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the idea behind being direct like this is that if you're open and direct but tactful,
Mm-hmm.
if you're direct but tactful, then you're bringing light to the situation. You are letting people know that it upsets you. And so I think what a lot of us might do, I'll say for myself, what I often tend to do is just get upset and stay quiet and
It
just not enjoy
festers
myself.
inside you,
Yeah,
right?
a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. No, I've been
Admit
there
it. Yeah.
too. I've been there
Mhm,
too. You're not the only one.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In those cases, I then you can't blame the other person for continuing that conversation and that topic that bothers you because you never let them know. That's the problem sometimes with being a bit more reserved about things is that or passive. Yeah, I think that's probably a better word. That's the thing about being more passive is that if you don't let other people know, then the behavior doesn't usually stop.
And I definitely have experience where people, until you point it out to them that what they're saying is bothering you, they in their mind they're just talking. They're just having conversation. And for them, it's regular conversation. They're not realizing it's triggering.
Yeah, and perceptions can be very different. So something to you that is so obviously triggering and offensive to someone else is very harmless and benign, and it can be hard sometimes to see eye to eye if you're not open and communicative with someone. But if, as Michelle said, if you do end up in a situation where you are direct with the person and you remove yourself from the situation, take that opportunity to take care of yourself so that you can remain calm. So, everyone's self care techniques can be a bit different, but, taking a walk if you're able to, you can drink some hot cocoa or just do something, you can read if you have a book with you, call a friend to help vent some of your frustration if it does get to that point where you did have to remove yourself from the situation.
Yeah. So if you do have to remove yourself from a situation, remember that at the end of the day, we also need to accept others for who they are. So accepting people for who they are takes the pressure off of us trying to change them, trying to make them someone that they're not. So again, just trying to change someone is an exhausting and fruitless endeavor, and it never works.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a rift between you and a family member, Another thing that you might want to consider is trying to make peace with that person before the family gathering, if it's possible. That way, you're not using the holidays as a means of airing out your arguments and disagreements. That's never a good place. So, if you can try to
Mhm.
make peace ahead of time, that's also something to consider.
That's an important one too.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, we wanted to wrap up the show with some two general self care tips that can help you manage your stress at the holidays, gatherings, or any other stressful situations. And one of them, and this is actually a really important one, especially for the holidays, is to make sure to limit alcohol consumption. So, limiting
Mhm.
your alcohol intake, especially if you're already feeling stressed or depressed or anxious, is really important. Try to replace alcohol with something that's a better and more healthy coping strategy and self care.
And many times, a catalyst for family discord, for family disagreements during the holidays, can be related to overconsumption of alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's difficult because people tend to drink during special occasions,
Mhm.
and it tends to be for enjoyment and pleasure. But alcohol use, it could also shift to being more of a maladaptive coping mechanism for mental health issues. And so once the alcohol starts shifting to that maladaptive pattern, then there's a pretty high potential for misunderstandings, miscommunications, lowering of healthy interactions. You tend to have lowered inhibitions.
Hey,
So
I was
you
about to
might
say
say
that.
things, yeah, you might say things that you normally wouldn't say, and that may not be as appropriate to say. And then I think that can really lead to a lot of tension and conflict.
Yeah, it can make things a lot worse if the conflict was already there, making it a lot
Mhm.
more awful and with everyone
Mhm.
involved, right?
Yeah.
And then the second general tip is to try to incorporate gratitude. So, practicing gratitude in general has proven mental health benefits. So, during the holiday season, something that you might want to try to do is make a list of 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for example, in a conversation that you enjoyed having with a family member, or being grateful of certain people in your life, and trying to really hone in and focus on those things. And then taking time to reflect on all those things that you are grateful for can help shift stressful moments and shift your mindset into one of appreciation and gratitude.
Yeah, I think you can go into the holiday gathering instead of going into it with kind of trepidation or just feeling a
Right.
bit of dread going into the situation. Because going back to what I said earlier, if you go into it with really negative feelings, that can
Mhm.
impact your behavior and then impact other people, and then it becomes a bit of a cycle. And so, in order to break that cycle, with what Michelle mentioned, with focusing on gratitude, you can go into it and say, "Oh, well, I got to see grandma, and I'm not sure how much longer she'll be around, and I'm grateful to have had another day with her, or I saw my cousin who I haven't seen in a long time." And you can focus on those positive aspects of it and really go into it with a bit more of a positive mindset.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that's all that we have for today's episode. It's a briefer episode about how to manage family dynamics. So I'm Dr. Adeline Leon, licensed clinical psychologist.
And I'm Michelle Young, licensed clinical social worker.
And if you liked our show on managing family dynamics at holiday gatherings and would like to see more content like this from us, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. That way you can get notifications when we upload our weekly episodes. And we would love to hear from you. In the comments, let us know. Have you had to navigate difficult situations during family holiday gatherings? And how did you manage them when you did? We would love to hear from you.
So, thanks again for tuning into the Mental Health Merienda, your snack size guide to mental health wellness. So, we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.